So identifiers, a very simple rule. Make sure it's a character in front of it, and well, it shouldn't exceed 255 characters. There are places where people intentionally make everything 255 characters and make it basically unreadable. It's called code obfuscation, intentionally making it unreadable. So, but for us, we're probably going to use just a normal, words, and it's probably going to be a fraction of that 255 character. But Java standard suggests, you know, depending on what you do, each identifier or name has to be less than that, which is plenty of space. And do not use Java keywords, which we're going to cover next. So examples of identifiers, uppercase names should not be used because should only be used for constant variables. We will discuss the fact that you can make your variables constant so that you initialize them and then they remain constant. Okay, keywords. Keywords are reserved words by the language, and if you look kind of carefully, I don't think if I press Control 0 here, even here it's not very visible, but there is a slight difference. In other browser it may be visible. I'm making some of those keywords kind of bold font because a lot of these keywords overlap with C and C++, and some are unique to Java. For example, such as synchronize, import, null, instance of. All these guys are unique to Java. But a lot of those keywords do overlap with other programming languages. Yes, Bruce?
Didn't you say not to start the identifier with a dollar sign or an
Yeah, don't do that. Yeah, I kind of mentioned it earlier. My saying today is for most of the cases and that we do here. Let's just type a character in front of our at the beginning of our identifier. You're absolutely right because Java libraries do use those a lot, dollar signs and underscores. So there may be some variables in your scope that you don't want to be overshadowing. So yeah, so we're going to stick primarily with identifiers like those are all illegal identifiers. But again, if I roll back to here, those are good and common style identifiers. Okay, so they do start with character, and they can be lowercase or mixed with uppercase, but not all uppercase, preferably. We're going to talk about the style and common agreements between Java programmers to use specific identifiers. Illegal identifiers. So why this identifier is not legal? Well, because there's a space. Spaces cannot be made part of the identifier. There's an @ sign, right? Punctuation of any sort is not allowed. No commas, no colons or semicolons. They all have different purposes, typically in statements that we make. So no, don't expect that. It seems like syntactically I am doing everything okay, so I just append this little plus sign or @ sign like this in front of or at the tail of my variable name. It should be okay, so it's not okay. Identifiers cannot begin with a digit. All right, so cannot begin with a digit. So second makes sense when you type your essay, but does not make sense to the compiler. It will be a syntax error because combination of digit 2 and ND just doesn't satisfy any possible rule in the language, and compiler will simply complain that this is. I mean, you can always find out what the error message will be. Boolean is reserved for the data type for true and false, and therefore it's a reserved word or it's a keyword technically, and you cannot use keywords to identify your variables. The main is a reserved word. You cannot, I wouldn't recommend using it anywhere else but for the name of the method, which is your public entry point into your Java program. So a class becomes executable once you have a main method. Interestingly, in Java, uh, there is no restrictions on how many classes are executable or runnable. You can create multiple source files with classes which do have this exact same method. They may do different things, but you could make multiple entry points into your application. So that's possible. But it will not really work well if unless you use this particular method signature. We will have a chance to discuss individual elements of the rest of the syntax. But this is the name of the method, strangely located somewhere in the middle. But it's easy to find because it has to be right in front of the opening parentheses, which then contains the arguments that the method can accept. Okay, so that's how you locate the name of the method when you look at it. But another restriction is that there can be only one main method in a single class. However, multiple classes can have main methods. And it's a little unusual, but I mean, you know, one possible example of that might be that I have an application and I have a main method that starts the application. The application may even have like a graphical user interface, display graphical windows with buttons and text boxes and other things in them. But I may want to run like a test or some internal, you know, run internal procedure inside that same application. And I may create another main method in another class, document it well, put enough comments so that people understand what it is, and be able to run the same application from the command line. And it's possible that in that case, it will never display a single window. It'll just do something and exit, which is expected perhaps from an application that has a console interface, right? So that makes sense. Interestingly, in C and C++, you cannot have more than one main. The reason is because it's typically specific to an operating system, and it is also specific to the linker utility. So the linker will not be happy unless it finds main in your C or C++ code, and also can recognize its own signature and make sure that it can construct a program for the target platform, a console or a Windows application or some kind of service. And there's a variety of types of applications that your linker will be able to produce for you. In Java, it's much simpler because it's Java Virtual Machine, and it's a managed environment. Oh, that's my player. Great. Okay.